My sense is from both my own experience living at Eastwind and other income sharing groups that I've gotten to know pretty well is that because labor tends to be counted like 1 hour is 1 hour, and people are sort of credited either through some formal system or some more casual system with work, no matter what kind of work it is, that it flattens a lot of the gender dynamics that are in our culture in general, where like women's work is devalued traditionally, like the domestic stuff is just not nearly as well compensated for in our culture in general. And so you end up with people making decisions not based on what is really inspiring and interesting to them and what they feel called to do with their lives, but based on the dollar. And when you are in an income sharing group, there's not that motivation. And so what I saw and what I see in a lot of these groups is that people find their niche and find what's really interesting to them, whether that's cooking 3 days a week and just, you know, getting to sort of explore being a chef for a group of people, or raising kids, or maybe it is management and out in the world at large, particularly women and people who come out of backgrounds where education isn't just an assumed in their family background, that they would never go into management stuff because it's just not their world, or it feels so hyper competitive out in the world in general that it's not appealing. And so people are really able to find their work selves and their contribution selves in a way in income sharing groups that I think is really fabulous. And I think that the mixing up of domestic and income producing work allows people to break out of those gender rigid boxes that the culture in general still has pretty strongly. You know, we've made gains, but I don't really think we're there yet, and so I think income sharing groups are way ahead of the culture in general. Well, it depends. I think income sharing has different challenges depending on what type of income sharing you're doing. The group that my husband is part of is called Sandhill Farm, and they basically operate as an extended family where they sit down and they talk about, you know, where money's going and have really deep, regular conversations about things. And I think that money is such a touchy topic for a lot of people that there's a way that I think the challenging part is that you feel sort of constantly exposed and ripped open and pressing on your own tender spots in the area of money. And I think it's really growthful, but I think it's really hard on some people. With the kind of income sharing group that I've been a part of, where there's a whole system set up, one of the things that I think was hard about it for me is that the work that was available that was income producing work was relatively limited. And we had a nut butter factory and a hammock factory and a rope sandal factory, and if you weren't into that work but you were inspired about something else that could potentially be producing income for the community, it was a pretty big deal to figure out how to add that into what was a really well-established and very functional system on its own, but adding new stuff was really tough. So I think there's a way that it can decrease the innovation and the sort of exploring yourself as someone who produces money. And I know not all income sharing groups do that. There's plenty of hybrids out there for how that can be put together, but that was definitely something that I think would have felt stifling to me had I stayed there for too much longer. So one of the really unique things about Dancing Rabbit is that we're basically a budding village of co-ops that overlap and intersect. So there are several eating co-ops, and those people eat meals together a couple times a day. And then there's a bunch of people who don't eat with the co-op at all. And then there's the Dancing Rabbit vehicle co-op that most of the people at Dancing Rabbit are a part of, and we collectively own 3 vehicles. And then, you know, there's a whole bunch of different co-ops. There's the shower co-op that uses the showers at the common house, and some people are part of it, and some people have shower facilities in other places, either in their personal space or in, we do have one income sharing group here that has their own house that has sort of a full batch of that stuff. And so when you look at the structure at Dancing Rabbit, it's really hard to draw it in bubble diagrams because it's like you have layers and layers and layers of different co-ops, and it's really exciting for me because what it lets people do is really pick those places that they want to be communal, and that they, like, where do they connect most easily in their lives, and what would they most want to share with people. And, you know, and for some people I think it's primarily an economic decision, like they have bought into certain things so that they don't have to build a house that has all those fully featured things, and so that makes it financially accessible to be part of an intentional community for them. And for some people it's more social. You know, they eat in a food co-op because they really like getting together with people twice a day and sharing meals with each other. And I think that it would be challenging. There are groups that have done it, but I think it would be really challenging to be 500 to 1,000 people and have one community that operates in kind of a monolithic way. And so what we have is a model that really allows a whole bunch of different types of sharing to happen and a whole bunch of different types of private spaces to happen simultaneously. And I think it's one of the things that makes Dancing Rabbit really vibrant. And I think it's probably going to contribute long-term to our member retention as well, because if there's something about DR that's not working for someone, they might be able to switch that aspect of their lives and still be able to contribute their piece to the whole. And I think it's really cool. So as far as the ideal population size, I think I have two very different sets of opinions about that, or two different pieces that I think are really important to take into account. One of them is what your land can reasonably support. I mean, I'm a sustainability-oriented person, and I think that a lot of communities have overstretched their land, like no differently than the way that cities overstretch land in general. And so I think being tuned into what is the land saying that it can handle, I think is really important to me. As far as the social relationships go, I feel like I really like small or big, and they've got different advantages to them. When you stay small, say, 35 people or less, you're able to really know everybody pretty closely and pretty intimately, and so there's a way that you can stay really tight with everybody and really in tune with everyone. And I think when you get between like 40 and 75, 80, somewhere in there, it's kind of an awkward stage because it's a little too big to stay really connected, but it's a little too small to get lost in the nice anonymity of things where you don't actually feel that impacted by people that you're not as close to. And so I think once you get up above 80 again, you get into sort of a different, like it does feel more like a village scale at that point, where you're able to have your pockets of closer friendships and you get your intimacy needs met with those people, but you also get the advantages of having a bigger group where there's more possibilities socially, for different kinds of activities happening, different types of interactions happening with different people, and you can afford to do more as a community as far as really interesting resource sharing. Like that's the size group where you get into like, you can afford a hot tub and, you can afford X, Y, and Z more expensive equipment without it being challenging for any one person. And so, so I'm an advocate of less than 40 or more than 80. There's been actual research done about village scale, and it seems like the best thing economically is somewhere between 500 and 1,000 as far as being able to have like really village scale. Somebody can be a baker if that's what they want to do and really be able to do that and not have to be a baker and 3 other things in order to make it work, and the village can have its own baker. So I think that research is good and interesting, and so I'm looking forward. I hope I'm still around when Dancing Rabbit hits 500 and I get to see what that's like, because I think that's a really cool scale.